So I Google this every couple of years. I think it was the top 10 hottest medical technologies. Well, they don't have 10 anymore, it's just 5. Maybe there's not as many. So remote patient monitoring, which kind of makes sense in the environment that we're in. Artificial intelligence, we've talked about that for years. Digital therapeutics, technology and mental health, that almost kind of makes sense too. I mean, a lot of people are kind of have cabin fever, right? From everything we've been going over the last couple of years. And then Internet of Medical Things, which I think has been a big deal for a couple of years. Yep. Okay. And so this was last year, the 10 emerging trends. So some of them are duplicated: advanced telemedicine, new methods of drug development, data-driven healthcare, nanomedicine, 5G, tricorders I thought was interesting. Star Trek people out there would probably love that stuff. Healthcare's digital assistants, smarter pacemakers, a lab on a chip, and wearable with a purpose. And we're going to talk about this in a second. If anybody has like Fitbits, or I think Samsung has a smartwatch, and obviously Apple Watch, you can do a ton of stuff with that. And I'm going to show some of that in a little bit. This one I always kind of liked, because I always think it's interesting how the big ones, Alphabet, so that's Google, that's another name for Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft, they're really, just like it says, accelerating their pursuit of healthcare. Anybody want to guess why? It's because they're so good. I mean, they're big companies, and obviously they're very successful. What do you think the reason they're getting into healthcare for? There's a big market. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. Obviously, part of it is driven by profit, right? They can make money in this. I know, if I remember right, I think Amazon was doing it because they go, why are we paying healthcare to take care of all of our employees? We can do it ourselves. I mean, imagine how big these companies are. And then Apple just started designing stuff. So I think it's an interesting market when you see those big players getting into healthcare. It's a way to make money, and hopefully one of their goals is to make it better also. So in 2017, FDA cleared the first EKG reader for an Apple Watch. Now, ironically, it wasn't Apple, it was just their watch. And so this company, AliveCor, actually made this band. So you'd put your finger here and it'd read on the other side of it, and it would take your EKG. That was pretty wild. I really wanted to buy this, but I've actually had Apple Watch. I actually bought the first one, which you never buy first generation of any technology. So I bought it at the end of it, right when the next one was coming out, so I got it cheap. And what I loved about Apple Watches is you can change the bands out. So I had like 25 bands. Sorry, it's bad. But so I like changing my band out to color coordinate what I'm wearing. Well, you can't do that with this band. You have to use their band only on that. So they introduced the band in 2016. It was approved by the FDA in 2017. Uses AI, detects 6 of the most common arrhythmias, and they recently introduced a 6-lead EKG for $179. Nope.
Sorry, we're having a little issue with our virtual attendee being able to hear you, but keep going.
Okay. So here's a couple of versions, and I've actually got one here if somebody wants to look at it. So here's the first version. I think when I bought it, it was $99. Now it's down to $78.99. It does 1 lead. And then the newer version of this actually looks like more like a credit card, but it does the same thing, right? It takes 1 lead reading. And I bought this one because I wanted it, right? I'm kind of a geek. I wanted something. I didn't need it. I don't have any heart problems that I know of, but I did have a friend of mine that his physician actually recommended he get one of these because I guess he had some type of arrhythmia that he wanted him to monitor. I go, good enough for me. I think I'll buy it too because I just wanted to play with it.
Does that store those in,
Great segue. Perfect. Thank you, Doug. So here's an example. So here's an EKG I did a couple of years ago, right? So notice, I mean, if anybody looks at this, you can see there's your little pulse right here. Here's your EKG reading down here. This is what I get. It's sent to my phone, and it gets sent to goes from my watch to my phone. You can store it on AliveCor for $10 a month or $99 a year, or you can actually just email it to yourself. So you're going to get it on your phone. It says, hey, you've got an EKG, so you can email it yourself. What I think is really cool is you actually encrypt it and put a password on it. That's awesome, right? So you can send it to yourself. You can send it to a physician with a password on it. I think that's awesome. So just by a show of hands, what lead is this? If I'm doing this right here, if I'm taking my EKG, right? You saw the picture, this is how I take my EKG. What lead am I looking at? Somebody raise your hands that knows. Got to raise your hands. Yes, lead one, how come? Perfect. You want a book. See me after the show and I'll give it to you. Yeah, perfect. That's what it is. And this is just to me, this is a good educational thing, right? A lot of times we'll say, well, it's got to be lead two because the amplitude looks like lead two. No, it's lead one, right? It's these two, left arm, right arm. Thank you. Actually, you're one of the few people to get that right, which kind of disappoints me in a room of biomeds. So Apple Watch, so remember I had the first generation, and then when the Apple Watch 4 came out, that's when they first introduced the EKG on your Apple Watch. And that's what it looks like. You actually get this waveform on your watch. So of course, when that came out, I go, yeah, I think I need to buy Apple Watch 4. So I bought that. And they received, I mean, they've gotten all kinds of FDA approvals for this. It's unbelievably accurate. I've checked it with monitors. You know, I teach now, so I've got a room full of patient monitors. I can hook myself up to various sources and check it. To me, it's spot on. It's amazing. So here's the readout that you get from Apple. So it puts everything up in here, tells when it's recorded, tells all the stuff on the bottom, right? What OS you're using, what version you're using. Here's your EKG. What does this resemble? Does anybody, this look familiar to anybody? Other than it's just a single lead. It looks like an ECG reading from like a Mac cart, right? A Mac 5500 or something. That's what you, because you get your name and you get this. Then you got all this stuff at the bottom that says here's a version of software and all that type of stuff you get. This one, and it gives you your interpretation over here, which is good. That's mine, so there's nothing wrong. And you can send this to your physician. With our generation that we're more used to that, this is going to be perfect, right?
Dave, that works because when I'm golfing, I get pissed off, I throw my club down, and then all of a sudden, have you taken a fall? You know,
I soon will be. That's right.
work.
You guys hit the next one real quick. Sorry. One second. There you go.
So
This is just kidding.
we're on 7 now. So the 6 came out recently. They added oxygen saturation. So again, what do you think I thought? I got to get it, right? I mean, I've got the EKG now. I want the SpO2. So I bought this and I go, how does that work? Well, I'm just going to play with it. So same thing. I've taken this unit and I've, just like I did with my EKG, I've got pulse oximeters because I've got a biomed lab and I play with all this stuff and it's like, this stuff is really accurate. It's unbelievable. I'm really impressed with it. And it takes it routinely during the day. I don't know how often, a couple of times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times a day. It's pretty cool. So here's an example. So I just took a month reading of the data that you can get from your watch, right? Which is going to be stored on your phone. So here's my heart rate over a period of time. So 1 month, 53 to 141, and then my oxygen saturation, 89 to 100. Actually, I don't think I've told this story before. One Sunday I got up and I was not feeling good. I was getting like really dizzy. I wasn't feeling that good. So I pulled out my Apple Watch, took my EKG, it was like 40 something. And I go, yeah, maybe that's why I'm getting a little dizzy. Of course, we went to the hospital, but still, it was kind of trying to figure out what was going on. So let's segue a little bit off the technology. This is 3 or 4 years old, but this is an indication of what's been going on in our field for a while. This is Intermountain Health. Hospitals are getting very upset with the cost of drugs and the delay of getting drugs. It's probably only been escalated recently. So this is from Dr. Mark Harrison. I can't remember if he's still the CEO of Intermountain Health. This is a shot across the bow of the bad guys. Hospitals state they are tired of increasing prices and drug shortages. We're talking basic drug basic drugs that they can basically buy a company and do it themselves. Here's an article from Dr. Eric Topol over at Scripps. Amazon could assume drug distribution. They could start using voice platforms like Alexa to help discuss symptoms and get feedback to coordinate hospital post-op care through voice-activated AI and do those things and other rote things. Remember we talked earlier about Amazon getting into healthcare? This would be an easy way. I don't know about y'all, I got a ton of these things in my house. I'm starting to back off on that based on when I know what they can do, but they're amazing. I mean, we talk to it all the time. Turn the lights on, turn this on, do this, set a timer, show me a recipe. It's really amazing what they can do. It's just scary how much information they collect back that they're taking from you. So just like I talked about the Apple Watch, well, if I see this thing, I want to experiment with it, right? So I took Alexa and I said, hey, Alexa, I've got a sore throat and a runny nose. And her response, I can't do her voice. I should record it. This might answer your question. Here's what I found on Wikipedia. Pain medication such as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Mayo Clinic advises gargling with salty warm water and resting voice without treatment. The symptoms typically last 2 to 7 days. That's not bad. I mean, that's just literally just asking Alexa, here's my symptom. So I played with it a little bit. Alexa, what's the closest hospital? Based on your zip code settings, here are a few examples. So they're using your zip code, and the closest is not always going to be a hospital. So you can see we have an emergency center, emergency room, emergency room, emergency room. But it wasn't bad just for asking, and instead of me Googling it. So I figured, okay, well, let's try their competitor. Let's what Siri does. Siri, I've got a runny nose and a sore throat. Siri actually did a better job. I've done this presentation a couple of times. She's doing a better job than she did years ago. So did a good job of pointing out clinics and hospitals. So it didn't give a, diagnosis of what you should do, but it says, hey, here's some hospitals. Urgentology, Cure Clinic, a Family Healthcare, Baylor Scott and White, and Texas Health. That was actually pretty good. Much better, like I said, than a couple of years ago. Hey Siri, what's the closest hospital? None of these are traditional hospitals, but they're clinics. Not sure what this wound care and hyperbarics would do for me. Maybe they know something, that I don't know what's going on. And then I thought the behavioral health thing was maybe interesting. Again, maybe Siri's listening to me and they go, you might want to visit this place, if you get a chance. Now, I did this a couple of years ago, and I don't know if any more vendors out there are doing this. How many of y'all speak to your phone? I don't do it as much as my wife, and I've seen some other people. I'm kind of embarrassed to ask her, what button do I push to speak to it? Other, not saying Siri, but like you're texting or something, because it's so much easier. I mean, I don't know, but sometimes we get into this long text thing and it's not that easy. At least not for my age, it's not. And so same with CMMS. I mean, how many times do we get upset because if you're a manager, we're not documenting, we're not doing the stuff. Well, it takes time to sit down at a computer and type all this stuff. And well, you can do it on your phone. Well, who wants to type this long thing on their phone, right? If you can, why don't we just talk to it? I mean, how many times do we talk to stuff right on our phone or to Siri or to Alexa to do something? And they do actually a pretty good job of voice translation within reason, right? I mean, sometimes we get those really bad autocorrect type things. Of course, we get some funny spellings every so often in work orders too. I would love to see more people do that. How about using a smart speaker to consult with your doctor? The last place I worked at, we reported to IT for, I don't know, a dozen years or so. And my boss was even more of a geek than I was. And he was telling me all the stuff he did. And one weekend, he wasn't feeling good, kind of probably the same thing, a sore throat, runny nose type thing. And he didn't want to go, he didn't want to get out of bed. He didn't want to go to the doctor, get an appointment and wait in a room and do all this stuff. And so he did a virtual consult. I'm sure it could have been with his phone, could have been with a laptop, but they diagnosed everything over the phone. And I think he did some, point the screen at his throat or something like that. They got the prescription and he said, in 30 minutes, he got everything done, which I thought was pretty amazing. Well, a lot of us, I don't know about y'all, a lot of us have these smart devices in your house. I've got a couple of them with the screen. Instead of pulling up your laptop, this thing's running all the time. Why couldn't we just use this to contact your physician, right? And say, hey, this is what's going on. You can look at my throat if you can. You can pull up your phone, do your EKG, or you can do a pulse ox or something like that. There's a lot of things you can actually do now. So I know Amazon obviously is the bigger players on it. Facebook has a lot of ads on it. I've never seen one. Lenovo also, and then Google has their own. I haven't used these other three. And obviously in the pandemic, telehealth has just gone wild, right? So we've talked a little bit about this. Medical devices on your phone. Ultrasound is really booming on basically hooking up an ultrasound to your smartphone, right? And one of the reasons I heard of that is a typical, I don't remember what a typical ultrasound costs, definitely $100,000, maybe $250,000. It's not cheap. And if you go to a really small hospital and they can't afford a couple of ultrasounds in the area, why don't you get one of these basically small ones? So you can see these transducers are about the size of your phone. So the physician just carry it in their pocket. And a lot of times it might be used in an ER where they could at least do some basic screening before they maybe pull up another unit or they take them somewhere else. Some of these units, I'll have another picture of this. We'll talk about that in a second. So you got ultrasound, you've got EKG, pulse oximetry, non-invasive blood pressure. So same thing. I went out and bought this pulse ox on Amazon, probably spent $15, $18. They don't have this model anymore. I love this one. This actually has perfusion index on it, which most of them I don't see do. And I actually forgot PI. What is that? I know what that is. I got to look that up. So I actually looked it up and it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. So that's kind of neat. This actually works for well. I haven't even changed the battery in this thing. This thing is working for years. And you know, they always have those little cheap batteries. So one thing I would recommend within reason, buy some of these things. I mean, I think somebody in a class yesterday talked about, and I've known this when I was a tech, respiratory therapists had these in their lab coats all the time. I mean, they had them all the time. And it's hard to control those. Now, you still might not want to endorse them, but you might want to at least verify that they're working correctly. So I want to check them for accuracy, needs of use. I've checked at a pulse oximeter with BC Biomedical. Have you all seen their pulse oximeter tester? They've got the simulator. I bought I think I have 8 of these in our biomed lab. They're actually pretty nice. They're really easy to use. They work real well. And my pulse oximeter is very accurate on that. I've tested my Apple Watch. I told you with bedside monitors. I bought and used both KardioMobile, Apple Watch. I don't have the money to buy a handheld ultrasound. I would love to, but maybe one of these days I'll do that. So let's talk about some of these ultrasounds. So GE has a V-scan, which actually has a dual head, depending on what procedure you want to do. Claris has one that's no subscription with cloud storage and 3-year warranty. Babe, subscription service with new probes every 2 years and cloud storage. And this is a newer one I saw, Butterfly, $23.99 per probe plus additional costs for diagnostic tools, procedural tools, education, collaboration. That's pretty inexpensive price to get into ultrasound, right? For someone that can't afford it, especially for a small area. So the earlier we talked about some of the stuff that's really important. I think most of us have known this for a while. Data is unbelievably important. Now, we're assuming it's clean data too, right? So make sure that your database, your CMMS, use it for you to make better decisions, right? I'm hoping y'all are just like me. I always had people calling me. We're going to replace defibrillators. What kind of defibrillators do we have? Who's the model? Who's the manufacturer? When were they made? How old are they? All that type of stuff. You should have that stuff instantly and it should be accurate, right? I was always in a database cleaning stuff up, looking for reasons why something wasn't accurate. I'd run a report and it's like, man, that doesn't look right. I've got to figure out why, go back and clean it up. So it goes without saying, right? Good information is the key to better decisions. Make sure your data is clean. Your database is not just about PMs, it's really about data. I mean, you see where people are getting into the world now, it's data collection. And Amy's obviously been a good about putting articles out there. And this one's what, 4 years old now almost, but it's still a good article. Oh, Larry Fenico wrote that. Holographic imaging. They said that we're going to witness a remarkable growth by 2024. So you could detect serious issues with sensitive organs, brain abnormalities, which are particularly difficult to interpret. This technology finds applications in ophthalmology, urology, pathology, and orthopedics. AI and machine learning. AI could improve health outcomes by 30 to 40%. Now, most of these slides I've got, if you want to do more, I put the little link down at the bottom. I did forget to do it on this one. I apologize. So AI could improve health outcomes by 30 to 40%. Mayo's using it for genetic markers. Stanford has developed an AI algorithm that can diagnose up to 14 types of medical conditions. And Memorial Sloan Kettering is using it for prostate cancer. This is actually one of the vendors out there, Glassbeam. I think I went to a show up in Minnesota years ago, and Glassbeam was there, and I saw some of the stuff they could do. I was actually kind of amazed what it is. I don't know what it cost, but the information you can get is amazing. So you can basically derive actionable insights from your machine log data. Know when a tube needs to be replaced. They can tell you more details than I could, but I thought it was pretty amazing. They had a company up in the Midwest that was actually using this for clinics that are out in the middle of nowhere. They could see that something maybe was starting to need to go, right? So they wouldn't have to worry about going out there. When it failed, they could actually predict when that tube would go out, be proactive, order a tube, have less downtime, which I thought was pretty cool. Know the usage of devices. Any of y'all are managers? I've had this question asked for us. Well, you know, they wanted to order a new MRI or a new CT. How much are they actually using this? Are we using it all the time? And most of us are going to say, I don't know, ask them, right? That's not the answer they want to see, right? This could actually tell you how much they're actually using a device to whether we need to actually buy one. Now, I hope most of us, if you're using infusion pumps, you could probably get software with that infusion pump software that can tell you what you're doing, right? I know most of us, they say I need more infusion pumps. It's like, well, I'm looking at data and my data says you're using your infusion pumps about 40% of the time. So we don't need to buy more infusion pumps. We need to figure out how to better utilize the ones we have, right? So that's when you can make decisions. This is where the executive team is going to appreciate your input, your data to help them make better decisions. AI for operating room. So computer vision during surgery, AI to roadmap surgeries as it happens, reduce risk, make surgery safer. Virtual training. This was announced almost 4 years ago. GE was doing more virtual training. And then recently, CBET, if you guys are familiar with CBET, College of Biomedical Equipment Technology, they have a booth in there. They've announced within the last year or two of doing a lot of virtual training for biomed and imaging, which is kind of cool.
They're doing that at the DOD school down in San Antonio now.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I got to test it out. It was really interesting.
Can you say that, talking to the mic for our virtual side?
Yeah, it's at the DOD Biomed School down in San Antonio. It's called METC, Medical Enlisted Training Campus, and they now are doing virtual training on a lot of the equipment. They've come up with diagrams and stuff, and you can go in there and just actually touch things. And
Wow.
it's very interesting. Yeah.
That's interesting because the military doesn't have a need for, they don't have a want, they've got equipment everywhere. I mean, they've got, if you ever want to go to a biomed school, if you can go to the military one down in San Antonio, it's amazing. I mean, they have full-time staff year round. They've got equipment all over the place. They really break it down and do a good job. How many have ever been involved with medical equipment planning, right? You're building a new wing, you're building a new hospital or something. You're going to get involved with the architects, nursing, right? And talk about where things go. They're going to ask you what type of equipment you need. I've done this. I've always found it was kind of the fun part about biomed, right? You're not doing the regular biomed stuff. You're helping use your experience on what worked or didn't work. Talk about processes. This didn't work. We need a bigger space. We're going to have to add places for computers and stuff. And so I like doing this stuff. And so I remember a couple of times that I would do, is sometimes they wouldn't mock up the whole hospital, obviously, but they might mock up an ICU. And they'd put patient monitor, they'd tell you where we'd go, and you'd put patient monitor, you put a bed. And so people can walk in, they kind of feel where stuff would go, right? So it's not virtual, but it's mocked up. If you had an empty floor like we did at a hospital, that's where they put the mock up at. Well, now, instead of doing that, or you draw it on paper, now you can do VR. So you actually can mock up the hospital or the operating room or whatever you're doing. People put the goggles on and they can walk around and go, okay, this OR light needs to be moved over here, or this table should be moved over here. What a great idea. That's an awesome use of virtual reality in medical equipment planning. And I think that's probably been out for a couple of years. Smart stethoscopes. I mean, how basic can we get with the stethoscope, right? But now you can actually get smart stethoscopes that can actually link to your smartphone. I Googled this. I thought I used to have a couple of more, so I Googled it again. I can only find a couple of them, but I think there's actually quite a few companies out there that make smart stethoscopes. Robots. So most of us probably know about surgical robots. When I was at Baylor, we had 15 surgical robots. I don't think, as far as I know, nobody can work on those. It's all the vendor has to do those. But somebody's doing it, right? I mean, there's a technician for the company that's doing that work. So it might not be an in-house biomed, but it's going to be somebody for the company. I was in San Antonio visiting a friend of mine, and they had one of those robots in a doctor's office. Still don't know why. And the guy says, I was talking to him about it. He goes, you want to play with it? I go, yes, I do. And so, man, you got to put your head in there and do things and pick stuff up. I thought it was amazing. And then he told me the hospital in San Antonio, they had like 15 in the hospital. It's like, geez, we had 15 for this whole system, and they got 15 in one hospital. UV cleaning robots, that's a big deal the last couple of years, right? I remember when we first got into COVID that a lot of people were looking at robots for, UV cleaning. Is anybody doing that? Are y'all taking care of those? Yeah, that makes sense, right? Supply chain robots. Anybody taking care of supply chain robots? Pharmacy robots. Now, we've actually had pharmacy robots. The last hospital I worked way back. I mean, it was the first robot. I mean, a robot. I mean, it's a cart that just automatically goes down a path, right? It'll actually call the elevator down, and I think it tells you to get out of the elevator. It goes in the elevator and it takes drugs up to the floor. It's actually kind of cool. 3D printing. So I'll have to add the military thing about VR, but I did talk to one of the guys, and they were actually working with 3D printers. So I don't know how elaborate you would go, but you've got a telemetry transmitter, you need a door that's broken, it's just plastic, why don't you just 3D print it if you can't get it, right? Really? What did you use it for?
Helmets. The air filtering helmets, they didn't supply any parts, and it was vital for our medical personnel, and we used our 3D printing.
Very cool.
The company was against it, but they didn't supply parts.
Anybody else doing 3D printing? All right, we're going to get here, right? Eventually, we've waited this long not to say anything about cybersecurity. I think that's a record for MD Expo, right? For a presentation. All right, so I did write an article 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know why I thought of this. And so I called it Cybersecurity is a New Electrical Safety Concern for HTM. And the reason I called it that is, for the most part, biomed was started because of the concern with electrical safety, right? I mean, that was what kind of spurred everybody in the 70s going forward. That was the big concern. It's not so much the big concern now, right? I mean, NFPA's written all kinds of stuff about it. But now, obviously, the big concern is cybersecurity. And so maybe that's going to be the second wave, if you want to call it that. So I drew a theoretical graph of electrical safety concern, and now cybersecurity is a big deal. And my feeling is eventually cybersecurity, it's going to still be there, right? But we're on that rise phase where we're still trying to figure out what we can do. What can vendors do? They've got to give us the latest version of OS and patches and all this type of stuff. So eventually, hopefully when that equipment comes out, it's going to be cybersecurity safe in the first place. What I would say, just like electrical, equipment was, right? They had issues in the early days, and eventually it was just, yeah, okay, we got it. We'll go forward. I hope most of y'all know that we should be working with IT. We can't do it by ourselves. IT can't do it by themselves. We need to work with them. You don't have to report to IT. We did, but they're just another group, right? Just work with them. HTM needs staff that understand cybersecurity, so that makes sense, right? You can't talk the lingo if you don't even know what they're talking about. And definitely at the last, I don't know how many years back now, at least 5, if not more, every AMI and MD Expo conference I go to, there's probably another one and another cybersecurity company and another one. And I know some of these have actually been bought out by other companies, but there's always more and more of these companies out there. There's probably every one of these maybe is out there. I haven't looked, but there probably are. So now we have new tools. If you're a biomed like me, I love tools. It's just a different set of tools. Hopefully you're not wearing these. I probably did when I was a young biomed back in the old days, but hopefully not anymore. But you just got a different set of tools. I told you I'm teaching, so I'm teaching not to wear this. I'm teaching students how to use network troubleshooting tools, right? Because that's going to be part of your task. And I'm still struggling with this. Over the years, I've told myself several times I need to learn Linux. There's a lot of stuff that uses Linux. I bought Linux, I've loaded it on computers, and it's like, yeah, I'll get around to that sometime. So I've started, I haven't just finished it yet. So medical devices, some of the things that we need to do in your database is identify IP address, MAC address, OS version, patch, virus protection version. I think most of y'all know this, right? Identify, this is something I think some people were missing. We did this at the last place I was at, is identify the type of physical security on devices. So you can put all your protection you want to on a device, and if somebody can steal it, okay, they might still be able to hack into it and get the information out of it. So we actually identified, so if you've got a central station computer, people are going to look at it and they're going to, that's just a computer, I'm going to steal it, right? And steal it. So we would actually put a cable lock on it, just like you would a traditional desktop computer. We also identified if we had something that was behind a locked door, right? So sometimes we had equipment that was behind a locked door. Maybe we couldn't lock it because it had to be transported, but we could show that you had to have bagged access to get into this room. Work with vendors to obtain MDS squared, determine OS version, patches, et cetera. These should be running for maximum protection. Many CMMS vendors now interface with cybersecurity companies so that information can now auto-populate, which is awesome. When I left, we weren't using this. We were typing the stuff in ourselves, which of course we can all make mistakes. And oh, by the way, that's static information, right? That was stuff we put in years ago. It might have changed. So this is one of the things I do like about this. It comes at a cost, but the nice thing about this is it's at least fresh. It's always current, which is nice. A good thing about Amy is a lot of the resources they have. So 2014, that's old, but they have a lot of information about cybersecurity. I think they printed a device, yeah, cybersecurity in healthcare. They have a TIR, Principles for Medical Device Security. I think IEC 80001, I think that's being redone because that's getting out there. That's quite a few years now. You can always go out if you've got an Amy membership, just search for cybersecurity in their papers. You can find a ton of stuff out there. And then one thing is, if you don't know something, find a way to learn it. And so I subscribe to these two sites. I'm sure there's probably a couple of more just to get emails or information on what's going on with cybersecurity, so I get a little bit more educated on this. I think most of us have heard that, and I still don't quite understand why your personal, your health information is more important than your credit card, but it's huge, and that's one of the reasons for cyber attacks. So private patient information is worth a lot of money. What's it, like 10 times worth what your credit card is worth? I don't get it. I mean, I'm boring, right? Well, you want to know what my heart rate and my pulse rate and all that stuff is, but there's a reason for it, right? They've been saying this for a while. Medical devices are an easy entry point. I think we've heard that too, right? They're typically running an older OS and a different version, a patch version that's going out there. Staff needs to access data remotely, especially now. So you're having another entry point for people to get into. Workers don't want to disrupt practice. I don't want to take this down yet because I don't want to disrupt what we're doing with somebody. Lack of education on online risk. People are getting better and better every day. You click on something from your bank and it's like, yeah, I think I'm going to click on that because it looks good, and it's spam, right? You just got to don't do that. The best practice I've always heard for this, if you get an email notification from what looks like your bank or looks like your credit card, go directly to the site. Don't go that link. That's the best advice you can ever probably get on the protection that way. Definitely the number of devices in a hospital, it just continues to increase. How many are touching the internet somehow? Healthcare information, again, it makes sense. We need to share this, right? It needs to go to a physician somewhere. A lot of times physicians are off campus, it needs to go back to somewhere else. So it's floating around all over the place. Smaller organizations often are an easier target. Maybe they don't have the budget to do a good job as protecting the big organizations. And then kind of redundant but outdated medical equipment from a security standpoint, it's I mean, how many people are still running equipment with Windows 7 and XP and who knows what else? This I thought was a great, I didn't put quotations around it, but this was a quote from the link below. As a security and risk professional in healthcare, there's one thing that you can always count on: change is constant. Innovative ways of delivering quality care are dramatically transforming the digital landscape in this sector. One of the biggest game changers is a push for the new Internet of Things devices and other connected technologies designed to enhance patient care and save lives. While these innovations have enormous benefits for patient and caregivers, they come with security and compliance challenges, right? I love all this stuff, but holy cow, it opens you up to a new can of worms. So this is fairly recent from Deloitte. Does anybody know how many devices you have in your hospital connected percentage-wise? How many? I mean, percentage-wise, at 40, 50, 43%. That's a lot, right? And that's now. Anybody else know their percentage? So probably your imaging is 90, 95, would you agree? Yeah, not everything, but definitely almost everything. Then the balance, your IV pumps, patient monitoring, EKG carts, lab equipment, a lot of that stuff's gonna be networked somehow. So if you can, and this kind of follows what they were saying here, so roughly 50%, right? 40 to 50, something like that of your equipment is attached to the network somehow. So that means a possibility of getting out. You can definitely expect that to grow. It's only going to grow. I mean, I've seen unbelievable stuff. It's on a network. It's like, why did that need to be on a network? I mean, we just saw a stethoscope, right? Really? It's on your phone. Now it's on a network. Barriers to connected medical devices. So why aren't we doing some of this stuff? Well, typically the obvious reason is cost. This stuff it comes at a cost, right? It comes at a cost to implement it, to buy it, to get people educated how to use it. So you've got cost, privacy concerns, the bureaucracy, obviously, of getting this stuff implemented, training. I thought this was interesting. Training and attitude of patients, trust and accuracy of data, government healthcare, health-related regulation, awareness of devices, attitudes and training of healthcare professionals. I thought that was interesting. So both our patients and our healthcare professionals have attitudes. Who would guess that? So what does this mean for us? I mean, right? I mean, what does that mean to me that we've got all this stuff going on? Well, our field's evolving, but it always has. I mean, I've talked to so many professionals that go, I'm not IT, I'm not this, I'm not that. Well, our field is evolving. It's okay. If everybody knows people in IT, especially like somebody my age, you know what they worked on when they first got in IT? Big gigantic servers. I mean, these gigantic, you know, the IBM mainframes, that's what they worked on. And then for a while, then they switched to dumb terminals that connected to the mainframes. And then later they went to desktop computers and servers. And now what are they doing? The cloud. I mean, every field changes, especially when it's technology, it changes dramatically. So that our field is going to change also. That's okay. Just be prepared for that. So definitely more IT knowledge and IT work will be required. More information about data, which we talked about before, and what we're going to do with it is required. We need to prepare for these changes. You know, the core of what we do, this is the thing I think makes a big difference, hopefully for people. The core of what we do hasn't changed. We're still providing patient safety, right? Doesn't matter whether it's a computer or something else. The core thing of what we're doing has not changed. The other thing I've kind of heard, I've actually heard this for a while. Well, more technology means we're going to get rid of people. Well, one way to look at that is if we get more technology and it replaces this person, well, who's taking care of this technology, right? And then who's trained to design that technology and support it? So things just shift around. So technology can definitely make our lives better, but it needs constant support. I don't know of anything that I've owned that's technology rated that you just turn it on, it works forever. I don't use Google, but I use Alexa and Siri. They're not perfect voice translators. Sometimes it makes it kind of fun, but when it's not funny. I thought this was hilarious. So I've got tons of stuff in my house. I've done smart houses for a long time. I mean, back to the 80s before the internet. And so I bought these smart light bulbs that Alexa or other devices can actually turn on, dim, put timers on them, all kinds of stuff. And then I got on my app for this company, it says your light bulb's firmware needs to be updated. What? Firmware on a light bulb? Whoever thought that would happen? It only happened once, but I did. I updated it. And then if most of us probably have some type of automatic doorbell. So I've got Ring, it's connected to Alexa, it does all kinds of stuff. It's awesome. You know, I can see when Amazon delivers a package or somebody's dropping off something or somebody I don't want to talk to, right? But they don't always work. I had a Ring doorbell for years and it just died. I never could get it. I just bought another one, put another one in, threw the other one away. But when they work, they're awesome. So the analogy I see is medical technology is not that much different. It's still technology. It's not perfect. You can't just plug it in and it runs forever. I just talked to somebody about this. I'm not going to mention the company, but it's probably quite a few. How often do you have to reboot a central monitoring station to fix it, right? I used to hate that when you call up IT, well, just reboot your computer. I'm kind of busy doing something. I don't want to reboot it and wait for it to redo it. But the sad thing is it fixes stuff, right? And I just hate that mystery about this thing. And I've heard this several times. I mean, I don't know if it's once a week, once a month. It doesn't matter to me. That's too often, right? Just fix it yourself somehow. Get something to fix it. So what do we need to do? Make sure your CMMS is clean and up to date. Good data is king. Make sure your IT information is including all the stuff you need, IP addresses, MAC addresses, et cetera. All staff, I'd say all staff should be trained on basic IT. It's like A+ and Network+. And actually, I say this should be a requirement at all biomed schools. Now, I just started teaching a year and a half ago, and it's a requirement. And I don't teach it, which I think is even better. It should be taught by somebody in IT. They have to go through, they call it something else, but it's A+ training, if you know what A+ training is. It's computers, hardware, and software. And they actually have to go through Network+ training, which you should have to do. I actually forgot about this, so I wrote myself a note. Years ago, I was in a meeting, so it was GE, because we were a big GE house, and we were talking about implementation of Muse. You guys know what Muse is, EKG storage. So it was GE, IT, and Biomed. We're in this meeting, and we're talking about how this thing is going to be designed and built and everything. And I think by then I already built computers. I felt like I was a whiz at computer stuff. And we're talking about how all this stuff is networked, and I'm talking, I got no clue what they're talking about. And as a tech, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed. I didn't know what they were doing, what they were talking about. And literally I turned around and I called the local university. I go, I need to sign up for A+ and Network+ and all that type of training. So what I'm telling you is when you identify something you don't know, fix it, right? I mean, find a way to get that education somehow. I went out and got my training on A+ and Network+. Now, sort of the ironic thing is I was already a supervisor or manager then, and I had to catch myself halfway through, and it's like, why am I doing this, right? I'm not the one doing it. I did want to know it from an educational standpoint. And so I finally talked to my boss. I go, we need to bring these guys in, and we trained all our staff. We brought them all in, and we trained them on A+ and Network+. And then we incentivized them to get certification. If they pass the test, they got a pay raise, right? I mean, you've got to incentivize people. Some people won't take the first step. Sometimes you got to find ways to incentivize them. Make it easier to get this. By the way, and I tell my students this too, I didn't take A+ and Network+ and instantly I'm a guru. I mean, it was just foreign to me. It took me a while. And I tell people, if you don't understand something, read it differently. Have somebody else tell you, look it up so a different way. And hopefully, eventually, the light bulb kind of goes off, right? And it's like, oh, now I kind of get it. And then they'll change it, but you'll learn again. Create a position for cybersecurity of medical devices. I know a lot of people have done that or in the process of doing that. If you're a department head, and at the time, years ago, before I left, I was a department head and I reported to IT, and I still had no clue what they were talking about. And I'm talking more about operational IT, what they were talking about. I would highly recommend you get Itil certification. I don't remember what Itil stands for, but basically it's best practice of IT. That's what it means. I think it's IT information library or something like that, but it's best practice of IT. They were offering it where I worked, and I go, absolutely, I want to do that. So they did it, I passed it, and it made a little bit more sense. I'll give you an example. If a nurse came up to you and they said, we had a problem in the ICU and there's an incident, what do you think? That's pretty bad. right? An incident is in a biomed, that's not a good thing, right? Somebody got hurt, something happened, we've got to take a look at it. You know what incident means in IT? Anybody know? It's a work order. And that's why, I mean, it's a simplistic example of why you need to understand the lingo, right? If IT came to you and says there's an incident up in ICU, you're going, holy cow, what happened? What do we got to do? Let's get risk management involved. It's just a computer. It's not working. You know, you understand the lingo of what they're doing. And then start working with these IT vendors and use proactive cybersecurity. So go ahead and meet some of the people that we have out there and find out what are some of the things we can do. You know, this is a great event to network with. Talk to your colleagues and ask what they're doing. What do you like about this company? What don't you like? What would you do differently, et cetera? And this is one of the things I like to repeat to people. When you went through school, so whether you're a clinical engineer or BMed, you learn anatomy and physiology, you learn medical terminology. One, at a minimum, so you could talk to nurses and physicians and respiratory therapists. They're not going to talk to you that way. You need to talk to them. You need to be able to talk their language. Well, this example I just gave you, why don't we do the same thing so we can talk to IT? We have to learn that we have to take the first step if we're going to communicate effectively with somebody. So take that first step. So I wanted to add this. So this is kind of new, but I've thought about this for a long time. If you need to think about preparing what we're going to do for the future. What do I need to do? What's my roadmap? Where do I want to get to? So if you're CBET or so if you're BMed, go ahead and get your CBET or CRES, right? Just do it. Get it out of the way. If you don't have any of these, then get your A+, Network Plus, and as a bonus, go for Security Plus if that's the route you want to go. If you don't have an associate degree, finish that up too, right? I know some people that went to the military, they have all military training, but they never take the other 1 or 2 classes to get their associate degree. Finish that stuff up. You never know when you're going to need that. And oh, by the way, you can't get that stuff. Yeah, you won't get that stuff overnight, right? Somebody says, oh, well, you need an associate degree. Oh, it's going to take a while, right? Well, prepare for that. If you're a manager, get your CHTM and Itil, right? So you can understand better what's going on. And it definitely, if you're interested in management, go out and get a bachelor's degree. So I love to tell stories. I don't know if you guys could tell. I love to tell stories, but I think I tell them because I hope it makes a difference to why I think this way. So there was a time at this last hospital I worked at, we had this was in the early 90s, there was a big thing called re-engineering the future, if anybody remembers that. So there's a big phase, all kinds of books published, hospitals were bought into it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to make healthcare better, make processes better. And I think the second team that was chosen was supply chain. So they go, we need IT, we need biomed, we need nursing, we need finance, we need, we had like 10 people that were on the team. And my boss says, I want you to go. And I said, awesome. I was excited. I mean, this is awesome. I got to be with all these people and we talked about the future, what we were going to do, how we're going to change things and all this type of stuff. And so you're in this room all day long with all these people. You're always throwing ideas around. You're playing with stuff that you want to do in the future. And we're at this like round table. And I don't know what we were doing, but we were like just talking. And a friend of mine, he's a finance guy, so he's got a bachelor's degree, and he was actually working on a master's degree in psychology. Not sure how those work together, but that's what he was wanting to do in the future. And so somehow it came up, and he goes, Dave's the smartest guy I've ever known that doesn't have a degree. And I kind of thought about it and I go, that's kind of a backhanded compliment. But at the same time, I always felt inferior as a BMed. I had an associate degree, but I didn't have a bachelor's degree. And everybody in this room, I can guarantee, had at least a bachelor's degree. And I know all the boss, I felt I was just as smart as they were, but I didn't have the credentials, right? This thing on the wall that says I had this. And then this is almost the same thing. I'm dead serious. As soon as that meeting was over, I got on the phone and I said, I'm going to get my degree, right? And so I worked forever to get my degree. And as soon as I finished my bachelor's degree, the next thing that popped up was like, well, everybody's got this. So then I went out and got I took a year off, but then I went and got my master's degree. You've got to think about where you want to go and what do you got to do to obtain it, because you're not going to get it overnight. So plan that stuff out. I was never one to write goals, but I definitely knew what I wanted to be and what I needed to get to that next point. So plan that for yourself. Be prepared. We've actually talked a lot about service information. I know we've had a debate for a long time that we can't get service information from vendors. I don't remember how I ran across this. Does everybody know what a OBD port is on a car? It's amazing. So again, I'm a geek, so I bought like 3 of these things, and I keep playing with them and putting them in my car. And so these are screenshots from my phone that shows me all this stuff. So all this stuff is taking information off my port on my car and putting it up on a screen and giving me information. It's got my gas mileage, my oil pressure, manifold pressure, battery, altitude, boost, all kinds of stuff. That's awesome. Why don't vendors have like a ODB port or something that's generic, right? So you can get data off there. I know some vendors have been talking about this for years, and it seemed to disappear, that they would send you a text, or you get a message that your fan has quit working on your central station, right? Or your filter is clogged, or something's over temperature, or something like that. Why don't we get more generic information? Of course, at the same time, how come we don't get service information that we need for equipment that we bought at our hospital so we can fix them correctly, right? Or manage it, or support it. This is something that's kind of interesting, and Justin couldn't make it here, but there's a ton of new stuff out there for biomeds. And so one is the Better Biomed channel, which is on YouTube. If you haven't watched it, I would really highly recommend you watch it. I've actually shown several videos to my students. I highly recommend they go out and look at it. I love the approach he takes to just looking at equipment, right? He's a great teacher, and some of them are short, some of them are a little longer, but it's it's kind of a basic picture of something. I love it. And then just outside our door, we got the Bearded Biomed. He started podcasting. And then I think he did a podcast on, there's a guy that did a Biomed 101 app for both Apple and Android. I've downloaded it, but I haven't played with it that much yet. And I think there's several, I think Amy had some guy, Health Tech Pro or something. There was some app, I still got it on my phone. I can still get all these podcasts this guy did 5 or 10 years ago. So there's a lot more sources of information out there for people. And definitely the younger generation is more prone to Google something and look for an answer somewhere. And so these are great sources for information. So final thoughts. If we don't embrace the changes in healthcare, somebody else will, and they're going to take charge of it, and it's going to leave us out. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This is the thing that's been kind of bothering me for a while about our field. And I was just as guilty as this, is, yeah, we don't do nurse call. That's facilities does nurse call. I don't need to do that. It's not important. It's unbelievably important for nursing and for patients that nurse call is working correctly. If you want to give it away, believe me, somebody will take it and do it. We're not going to do beds. Somebody else can do beds. Let facilities take beds. Beds, most beds weigh a patient. Good grief, people. And they do all kinds of stuff. If you continue to give nurse call, I'm going to give beds away, I'm going to give this away, I'm going to give this away, eventually somebody's going to say, why do I need you again? Right? I mean, somebody's taking care of everything. I was guilty of this. I would get upset when somebody, in management would keep pushing stuff on us. Well, it's something I finally thought about the other day. Would somebody give you responsibility of something if they didn't trust you? Think about it. I mean, would I call up Biomed and says, I got this new project I need to do. I don't trust you. You're the dumbest guy in the world, but I want you to do it. No, they wouldn't do that. They trust you. They trust that you're going to take care of it. They trust you maybe more than somebody else, and that's the reason they gave it to you, especially when it's not, you might consider medical equipment, but it's something to do with technology. It's sometimes people, we don't like the new name, HTM, but maybe you should embrace it. It's like, you know what? It's healthcare technology management. We're managing technology in healthcare, and I think that's what the CEOs, CFOs, nursing, that's what they're looking for. We're the people who understand technology, so embrace it and go with it, even though it might not be traditional medical equipment. Take it as a compliment that they trust you enough to give you something that important to go with. Okay. Any questions? I appreciate y'all coming this early in the morning. Yes.
So Dave, I think great presentation, spot on. I think one of the things is, the PMs and the basic biomedical, that's expected of us anymore. And, they can get anybody really to do that. It's those value added things that you've spoken about today in your presentation, keeping your finger on the pulse of technology, no pun intended, but That's exactly what we need to be doing. That we need to develop that value proposition for our employer. Where are they going next? Give them strategies to lower the cost of healthcare, streamline healthcare, try to lower our length of stay for our patients through the use of technology and guiding them in appropriate purchases to achieve those goals of lower lengths of stay and things like that. So great presentation. I hope that our folks in attendance today
Thank you.
got a little nugget. Thanks.
And I think I agree. I think somebody said yesterday, I don't know if it was in Bensing's presentation or the other one, but is people should look at us for not just to fix a device, but to fix the process. And I think Bensing mentioned that. Sometimes we forget it. We're so knowledgeable about how things work. Sometimes you just got to sit and watch what they're doing. It's like, oh, well, the equipment's working fine. We're just doing a process wrong. We're doing this step instead of this step. I had a guy, I was talking in the elevator, and he says they were trying to figure out why this one piece of equipment was failing all the time. And he says, total luck. He just happened to get in an elevator, and some person, I don't remember if it was a respiratory therapist or not, but they had some piece of equipment with them. And when the elevator opened, they yanked it with the cord and pulled it. You know, they didn't push it, right? I mean, they yanked it by the cord, and then of course it hits the threshold and the thing almost falls over. And it's like, exactly. Sometimes look at the process, figure out, don't just keep fixing the same thing over and over and over. Find out why. To me, what differentiates a really excellent biomed is I'm going to find out why this is failing and fix it so it doesn't fail again, right? Fix the process. Yes.
When I was working at the hospitals, one of the things that biomed should always be involved in is on the committees, because we really we were remodeling the labor and delivery, and it was my idea to make sure that we put plugs in an area where the staff would be conveniently able to plug in their IV pumps. We made sure things like that. They came up with an idea, something called a NIM, where they had somebody who went and redid the rooms and restocked the shelves. So when I was on the committee to remodel ICU, I brought that up, that they have somebody upstairs that takes care of getting the room ready for the next patient. And the vice president of nursing said, that's why we have biomed, because they work all over the hospital. They know about things that work in the lab, things that, like, I'll give you a great example. One time they had twins that were born. My job was to come and take care of the monitoring up there and with the babies. And one of them was in trouble, and they needed to do blood gases. I said, I'm going down to the lab. I'll take that down right away. I know exactly where to take it. So I took it in. I said, hey, we got a stat up in the nursery. They said, just leave it there. I said, wait a second. When somebody comes in and says, blood gases, open heart, you immediately stop and do it. But you don't stop it for a baby that's in trouble. Again, management said, man, we're glad you brought that up. We're going to come up with baby blue so that they stop what they're doing and go run blood gases. So there's things that we can bring to the hospital that, because of us going all over, that can, and the vice president of nursing said, when they were going to do across the board cuts in labor, they said, leave biomed alone. We need them to take care of our equipment. Thanks.
Great comments. Very good. Very telling. You're right. I mean, I think sometimes I forget that too. Literally, you're in every department. You kind of know what's going on. You get the pulse and the feel of how things work and doesn't work. And you can take a best process like you saw, right? And then move it over here or bring it up to somebody to change. I was fortunate to work for a lot of different hospitals. And so I could, and they were in the same healthcare system, that it helped. And so I could go to this meeting over here and I'd go to this one. It's like, this is how we're doing it over here. I remember we had a problem with telemetry transmitters. I mean, what happens to get dumped in water, or somebody take a shower, who knows what gets on them. And so I had this one hospital that their failure rate was unbelievable. So I took another hospital in our system, had the same transmitter, the same basic bed size, and I looked at the failure rates between the two. And you have to bring it in a positive light, right? Because you want people to react to it and go, oh, yeah, let's do something. Let's see what we can do to make difference of the failure rate that we're having. And hopefully you can sell it to them that when these go bad, what does that mean? You're not monitoring, right? You can't monitor somebody on telemetry when the transmitter's dead. So it's going to be taken out. So you've got to sell it to them from a positive standpoint and they'll buy into you.
Dave, great story. This guy over here, I have two technicians that spend a lot of time in the operating room. We bought a ProFX table that our trauma surgeon had to have it. $170,000.
Wow.
And these two guys, would spend a lot of time in the OR. They saw it sit in the corner. It maybe was used once or twice. The trauma surgeon used other tables, and the sales rep came in one day and was talking to the two technicians from clinical engineering, and was talking about the anterior approach to hip replacement. We weren't doing that at our hospital. Guys got a couple of DVDs, watched videos at home, came back in and said, Chris, we'd like to sit in the surgeon's lounge at lunchtime and talk to a couple of the orthopedic guys. They did that. I said, yeah, sure, do it, man. They got a young guy to bite. The company took that young guy up to a cadaver lab, a couple hours away. He came back. The surgeons that didn't bite realized, hey, this guy's patients are getting out of the hospital in a day or two, 24, 48 hours. They're out. My patients are in all week. They started doing the anterior approach to hip replacement. They wanted to learn. So
Cool.
just because a couple of biomed guys cared enough to not waste money of a surgical table sitting in the corner of the OR. So we do impact.